Hello, this is Chris Hurd, Associate Professor of Religion at Pepperdine University, here with a screencast to help you get started typing in Hebrew on Macintosh OS X. So, Hebrew support is already built into Macintosh OS X. You don't have to install any special fonts or anything like that in order to access Hebrew characters. However, you must turn on the Hebrew keyboards in order to be able to type Hebrew characters. So let's start with that process. The first step is going to be to open up our system preferences. So let's find System Preferences. Open that right up. And once we have System Preferences open, we'll go over to the Language and Text options and click on the Input Sources tab. Now, on the left-hand side of the screen here, or I should say on the left-hand side of the pane, we have a list of different input methods. So it's not absolutely necessary to turn on the keyboard and character viewer, but I'm going to suggest that you do that. You'll find that it makes your life easier a little bit later when you start actually trying to type with Hebrew for the first time. Then we're going to scroll all the way down and find our Hebrew keyboards. Now you'll see that there are two choices that ship with Mac OS X. One is simply called Hebrew. That's the one I prefer, so I'm going to go ahead and tick the box next to it to turn it on. And the Hebrew keyboard resembles an Israeli keyboard layout with regard to the consonants. So on my Hebrew keyboard, if I want to type the letter Kof, I press the E key on my English labeled keyboard. The Hebrew QWERTY keyboard may be preferable to you if you're just starting out, and it attempts to map the Hebrew characters to phonetic equivalents or some other easy to remember equivalent on the English keyboard. So if you want to type a Kof using the Hebrew QWERTY keyboard, you would type the letter Q. Now, if you have installed the Society of Biblical Literature's new SBL Hebrew font created by Tiro Typeworks, then you might also have installed two additional Biblical Hebrew keyboard layouts. One called Biblical Hebrew SIL for Summer Institute of Linguistics. This one is a quasi-phonetic mapping like the QWERTY keyboard I mentioned a moment ago, and one called Biblical Hebrew Tiro, which is more of an Israeli-style mapping of the consonants. I'm going to go ahead and turn on Biblical Hebrew Tiro as well in order to illustrate something about typing in Hebrew a little bit later on. Now, at the bottom here, you may notice that this check mark automatically came on as soon as we activated more than one input method. And we now have the selection Show Input Method in the menu bar right down here in the lower right hand part of the Language and Text window. So we're going to leave that as it is. We do want that on. Look up in our menu bar now and see that my menu bar now has a little American flag representing United States English. And if I want to switch to a different input method, I can choose from that menu: Hebrew, Hebrew Tiro, the character viewer, or the keyboard viewer. And I'll show you examples of those just in a little bit. Before we close our system preferences, make sure that you take a look here about the input source shortcuts. And the one to notice is this Command Space. You're going to be using Command Space potentially as a keyboard shortcut to move between different keyboard layouts. Now, if you don't want it to be Command Space, you can click on Keyboard Shortcuts and change that, but I'm used to Command Space, the default, and so I'm going to leave it that way. Now I can quit System Preferences, and we can actually go type some Hebrew. So I've already opened a Pages document. I'll switch over to Pages here. I've made it large so that you can easily see, even in a reduced size video, what's going on my screen. I justified the text and set it way up at 72 points so that it would be easily visible. Now, my input menu shows an American flag, which means I would be typing in United States English if I start typing right now. But I want to type in Hebrew, so I'm going to select Hebrew from the input menu. and then I can just start typing. So if I wanted to type the first few words of Genesis, I would type Bereshit, Bara, Elohim. And there you go. That's really as simple as it gets. You just switch over to the Hebrew keyboard, start typing, and you get Hebrew characters. Now suppose that you don't know which key to press. That's where the keyboard viewer comes in. From the input menu, you can choose Show Keyboard Viewer, and you get a very nice keyboard viewer, a diagram which maps your keyboard onto the screen and shows you what all of the keys are. So the consonants are all shown here in their standard layout. If I hold down the Option key, you can see that the Mac Hebrew keyboard maps the vowel points onto the number keys with the Option key held down. There are other things that come up with Option Shift and so on. If we switch this to the Biblical Hebrew Tiro keyboard, you can see that there are certain characters such as this round circle which don't appear on the Mac Hebrew keyboard layout, and if I hold down the Shift key, you'll see that in the Tiro keyboard the vowel pointings are mapped to the ASDF line on my keyboard. So it's the same characters, but they can be accessed in different ways depending on which keyboard layout you're using. Now, another way to enter characters is using the character viewer. So if I open the character viewer, and I'm going to go ahead and go back to my Hebrew keyboard layout, the character viewer, you might need to click on the disclosure triangle for Middle Eastern scripts and click on Hebrew in order to see what I'm seeing. Gives you a little grid that shows you the Hebrew consonants, the Hebrew vowel pointings, various kinds of accents, different things that you might need in order to type your Hebrew word. And you can click on any one of these to see a larger version, to see what it looks like in different font faces, and even to insert that into your current word processing document. So if you get stuck and you just can't find the figure that you need, you just go to the character menu. Now one last comment before we sign off on this particular screencast. Because Pages is using the text engine that's built right into Mac OS X, it should be obvious that you can use your Hebrew text throughout the file system. So let's go back to the Finder here and create a new folder. Now if this folder were intended to hold all of my work for my Hebrew class, I could type in English and call it Hebrew, but this is the great thing. I still have my Hebrew selected, and I can just type Ivrit and have my folder named in Hebrew. So you can name your folders and your files using Hebrew characters as well. Okay, one final point, and that is to show you the Command Space shortcut. I've been switching between keyboards by going up to the input menu and making a choice from that menu, but I can also hold down the Command key and press the space bar. And as long as I keep the Command key held down, I will get a little list right in the middle of my screen of the keyboards that I have installed. So by using the space bar, I can cycle through them till I get the one I want, release the Command key, and then start typing in whichever alphabet I've chosen. In a future screencast, I'll show you a little bit about the challenges that we face when trying to type in Hebrew on the Macintosh. But for now, I need to bring this to a close in order to respect YouTube's 10-minute limit. Happy typing!